adapted. With the distance, you know that if you have a given, for example, 4 meters to the east and 6 meters to the west of a car traveling, traveling to the east at 4 meters and to the west with 6 meters. The displacement obviously would become negative 2, which tells us that it is 2 meters to the west. But the distance, of course, since the scalar quantity is just the algebra sum, which will become 10. We know that already. So this would, of course, give us an idea that distance and displacement are different, and displacement requires a direction. So for the meantime, we're going to consider only two-dimensional system along the xy plane. And with that, we're going to use angles as our quantity that will define our direction. And in terms of physics, there are a lot of ways for us to configure angles. And initially, we use the directional coordinate, which uses the north, west, east, and south coordination. Now, we need to look for reference angles or angles that are acute or less than 90 degrees. No? So, for example, we have number 1, 50 degrees. No? For a directional coordinate system, how do we read 50 degrees? Is it 50 degrees from the given north of east, 50 degrees east of north? Ano yung tamang basa dyan? Anyone? Is it A, 50 degrees north of east, or letter B, 50 degrees east of north? Volunteer? Plus points. Dalawa lang yung options natin. Sulat na lang Mr. dito. Is it 50 degrees north of east or 50 degrees east of north? Ano ang ating correct answer for that? Is it A or B? Volunteer? Oh, si Rex na naman. Si Mariel. Sige, si Mariel muna. Mariel, what's the answer?
North of east. 50.
North of east. Very good. Because it is from east going to the north. Can we know north? Okay, east. It's north of east. So basically, it's going to the north from the east. So north of east. So letter A. Very good. So from there, of course, you know that. Okay. Very basic. So kung saan siya nagpunta muna, that's the letter. Kung saan siya galing, that's the second letter. So number 2 will be very easy. It came from west. It's going to the north. So it's north of west. No? So 60 degrees north of west. Number 3 obviously will be 60 degrees west of north. So going to west coming from the, west of south coming from the south. And then the last one, of course, will be 60 degrees, of course, south of east. Okay? Now, as you can see, these reference angles or acute angles are coming from any direction. But you know already that when it comes to components, we define the f of x as f of or the magnitude of the resultant vector times the cosine theta or the angle of the resultant vector. And the y component will be the f sine of the theta or the angle of the component vector. So this is only true if and only if the angle you are referring to is a reference angle that is measured from the positive or negative axis. Or the theta will no longer be adjacent to x, because, and that will not make x be the cosine theta, basically. No? So kapag tinanggal natin si theta or hindi natin siya measured relative to the x axis, then the formula that we are showing the window will not be true anymore. So lalo na pag ito ay measure natin sa y, from the third example, the adjacent sides now will become the y-axis. And therefore, ito na yung magiging cosine, babaliktad siya. So for our conventional purposes, we're going to suppose for the meantime that the angles or the reference angles that we are trying to measure must know it already. But if we're going to solve a lot of problems, then it will be very confusing. So I highly suggest for them students method as it is. But for this one, it's 60 degrees measured from the south. So that we wish to have, and that is very easy because That terminal side here is just equivalent or has its equivalent direction if we measure that 60 degrees as this angle. This small angle coming from west going to the south, which is obviously the complementary angle of 60, which is 30 degrees. Therefore, we can say that 60 degrees west of south can just be 80 degrees south of west. Is that correct? So it's the complement of 60 degrees, and therefore they're just equal in this directional coordinate system. So ginamitan lang natin siya na complementary angle, no? So this 30 degrees south of west now satisfies this condition for our calculations in the future. So 30 degrees south of west is a better form for the meantime for 60 degrees west of south. Now for the last example, it's obviously from the east. So this is 60 degrees south of east or from east going to south. So it's already along or from the x-axis. So it is as is for our convention. Right? Again, we were able to get 60 south of west of south into 30 degrees south of west by using this concept of complementary angles, which again, the sum is equivalent to 50. So if you have 30 here, obviously this is 60 degrees, no? And this is again in line with the discussion of the other ruling, or not ruling, but like a postulate of the supplementary angles, wherein if you have a straight line, basically this is important later on. If you have a straight line and a terminal angle, a terminal side here, the angle 50 here can form further a straight line here by adding 130 to get the 180. So 30 here will form a straight line if you add the angle or an angle with 150 degrees. No? So that's supplementary angle for us. Okay, so of course, these angles are very, very easy to identify. So number one, kagaya ng sabi ni Mariel, no? So let's just answer. So for number one, this is just 50 degrees. Saan papunta? Papunta siyang south. Galing siyang east. So 50 degrees south of east. Number two will be 45 degrees papuntang west, galing north. No? So west of north. So basic notation. So the other one is the one that we will specify into cylindrical and spherical coordinates as we go through, no? For the meantime, two-dimensional. Yeah. For those kinds of examples, ang mas magagamit natin ay tinatawag nating polar coordinates, no? So si polar coordinates, like what you know already, does not uses north, east, south, or west. It uses just the x-axis as the reference angle, and with that terminal radius rotating, creating 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, and the so on, 360 degrees or back to zero. No? So for example, we have here 50 degrees, 40 meters yung kanyang length, and then 50 degrees ang kanyang vector with magnitude 40 meters, comma, angle 50 degrees. No? So that is the polar coordinate, just r and 3 theta pi. Pag ito three d dadagdagan natin ng p sa pang-angle degrees. No? So, yun siya. Now, sino mga convert nito into directional tayo? Anyone?
230.
Mariel, ha? Ano ang directional version nito, Mariel?
230.
Rex. 230, so
40 meter,
40 meters.
40 meters, 60 degrees.
60 degrees, correct?
North of west po.
It's a reference angle. Yes, Mariel. 128
Napaulit
reference.
po.
Sorry.
Sorry po.
Ulit. Okay. So, ang ating sample, for example, polar to, di ba? So, yung polar ng 50, 40 meters, 50 degrees. Ang kanyang directional would become, this is north. Oops. Diba? This north, this is east. So, sa number 1, this will be 40 meters, 50 degrees. Going to north, coming from the east. Tama? Going to north, coming from the east. So, that's number 1. Si number 2 naman, 120 degrees yung kanyang angle coming from the positive x-axis, no? So, pag ginawa mo siyang directional, kailangan mo ng reference angle na manggagaling sa x-axis, no? So, since 120 na itong malaking angle na to, itong maliit na angle na to will just be 60 degrees, tama? So, this will become 40 meters, 60 degrees. It's going to the north, coming from the west. So this is 60 degrees north of west. That's equivalent to 40 meters, 120 degrees. Tuwa, Maria?
Sir, saan galing po yung 40?
40 yung given, di pala natin lalagay. Coming from kanina.
Thank you po.
Hindi na siya nalagay dito. Nandito siya kanina. So yung 40 radius natin siya kanina. Mga di natin na-highlight yun. Sorry for that. Ayan, siya yung natin. Hindi natin nalagay ulit. Okay. So siya yung left natin for vector, this white vector. To be 40 meters in length or in magnitude. Okay? Let's try. So actually, ito yung sagot natin kanina. No? Pinulit lang. So again, 40 yung kanyang length. Ang kanyang angle would be, for number 2, with 60 degrees. No? Okay. Number 3 tayo. So number 3, burahin ko lang. So, number 3. 210. 210 because if the given is 40 meters, 210, of course, that will be from 80, okay, 180, so bumalik ka ng 60, so nag-minus ka pa ng 60, you got 210 degrees, no? So the vector 210 in terms of scalar can be expressed as 40 meters, 60 degrees, which is this one, coming or going to the west, coming from the south. But we can express this in terms of a reference angle coming from the x-axis. So this will be expressed as 40 meters what? Dapat yung ano mo, if you wish to transform 60 into an angle that is coming from the negative x-axis. Anyone? Generals.
Yes,
Generals. Anong sagot
Sir,
natin?
30 degrees po, sir. 40 meters, 30 degrees. Wait lang po. South of west.
Very good. South of. So that's it. Which is better? Well, for the meantime, the 30 degrees is better because we wish to have convention or negative axis. But again, normally it doesn't matter. no? Lalo na kapag yung mga students kayo, kagaya nyo, skilled to manipulate different angles and reaching the sine point functions of relatively, no? Pero kapag gusto nyo less confusion and more consistent equation solutions, then you can conventionally use reference angles from the x-axis. Okay? Last one. Oh, wait lang. Okay. Number 3 tayo. Number 3. Yun na. Wala na. Okay, number 3. Number 3, sorry. Number 4. So, number 4 tayo. So, number 4, 40 meters, 300. That is obviously measured from 360 minus 60, no? So, we can get that as 300. So, one full rotation is 360. And you need 300, so you just go back by 60 degrees, no? To get that 300 degrees. So, if you wish to express 4 meters, 300 degrees back to what we call the directional convention, this will just be simply 40 meters, the magnitude of the arrow, 60 degrees, going south, coming from the east. So that will be 40 meters south of east. Okay. So, yeah. So that's your polar to directional and direction to polar. So those polar coordinates in a three-dimensional system or x, y polar coordinate is important because when we go to the analytic calculations, that will tell us kung ang ating bang y ay conventionally positive or negative. No? Kasi in our x, y coordinate system, the one going to the right is positive, on the left is negative, up is positive for the y, and going down is negative for the y. So if your direction is along the first quadrant, then your both x and y components will be positive. On the second quadrant, like si x, positive si y, obviously. And if you intentionally, and on the fourth quadrant, positive ang x component, negative naman si y component. Okay? So let's, that will be your ating conversion. Bago sa tinatawag nating properties, no? So, okay, tayo. So, let's try to convert the following file. What if we have the following example? So, we have to convert polar to directional and vice versa. We have 5 newtons to 30 degrees, and we have 3 pounds and 300 degrees. And then for direction, now we have, for example, 3 kilometers, 30 degrees, and sabi natin, 4 newtons. Okay, so 1 minute or 2 minutes, no? So pa-type in ako ng sagot natin dito sa ating chat box. So bibigyan natin ng plus points yung ating makakuha ng first answers, but you still have to type in your answers, guys. So 1 to 4 lang. Kaya? 2 minutes? Okay. So sa chat box lang pa-type in. So si Ma'am Glenda, I think type audit. Ma'am, try natin, no? Nasa si Sir P. Yes, Miss, thank you. Ayan, Sir Marlon. Nandiyan pa ba Sir Marlon? Ayan, type in lang tayo dyan. 1 minute to 2 minutes, guys, kung kaya. Okay.